Then out spake brave Horatius, the captain of the gate. To every man upon this earth death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods?
The final 30 minutes of the journey to Stockholm were the longest of Marisol's life. Hurton clutched his phone close to his chest, listening intently as the creators and creations went over their plan one last time. "We have to take all of Malum's allies," Sebakira was saying. "Break his hold on them the same way as Mina here." "I can free 2 people at a time," Akira said, "but it takes a lot of focus. I need you to cover me while I work." "In that case, we need to force Malum's team to split up, so they can't reinforce each other," Blake pointed out. "What if a few of us go out to Rothelman Island and attack the broken gate?" Varian interrupted. "Attack the gate? No, let's use it," he or she said. "Let's pull some really powerful scion out of their story and get them to help us. Let's get Empress Tantamile, or Dwayne Gardner, or the Ranchinui twins, or heck, let's go all the way and get Jericho." Akira shook her head. "It's a good idea, but we need the reality perforator to do that," she explained. "We can try to take it from Malum, but knowing him, we'll have to take it off his corpse." While the creations argued with each other about the best way to attack Malum's team, Marisol sat down next to Blake in one of the seats near the front of the plane. "I have an idea," Marisol said. "Another idea, I mean." Blake leaned over and allowed Marisol to whisper into his ear. He listened to Marisol's idea for about 2 minutes, and then he interrupted. "I'm starting to hate this plan," Blake said. "You're walking a fine line between a really clever trap and just surrendering to Malum." "I think it could work," Marisol said. "It's a long shot," Blake said. "No chance in hell that would work." Marisol wanted to press the argument, but Akira suddenly appeared in the row in front of the 2 creators. She was holding Callie's cell phone. "Sorry, but I've got a bone to pick with my creator," Akira said. "Blake, I'm going to ask you this just once. Did you make porn of me?" Akira turned the smartphone to face Blake. Marisol recoiled in shock as her eyes were assailed by a very lewd image of Akira. Blake shrunk into his seat, muttering, "Oh, not this bullshit again." Marisol stood up and quickly got away from the confrontation, trying to tune out Akira's complaint. Moving toward the back of the plane, Marisol pulled out her smartphone and opened an app she had not used since before this adventure began. "What's that?" Aisling asked, looking over Marisol's shoulder. "Where did you come from?" Marisol gasped in surprise. After a moment, she calmed down. This is a speech-to-text app. It's how I write my own stories. And if Blake's plan doesn't work out," Marisol lowered her voice, "then this might be our last chance to save ourselves." "How?" Aisling asked. "How does it work?" "The computer listens to my voice, and then it writes down whatever I say," Marisol replied. Marisol raised her phone and began to talk into it. "The god of ink was a lonely deity," Marisol said. As she spoke, her words were transcribed onto the page. "High atop the great mountain, above the silver clouds, the many gods and goddesses of the world lived in a glorious community. They were neighbors and friends, and some even came together to form families. But the god of ink had no one close to him. He was the patron of storytellers and wordsmiths. He spent his time hunched over his writing desk, creating through his art great wonders beyond the wildest imagination of children. But when the day was over and there was no work left to do, the god of ink spent his leisure time alone. He saw his fellow deities form friendships, flirt, and fall in love. He began to feel empty." Aisling let out an awed gasp as the text appeared on the screen. She looked up at Marisol. "How could a story help us?" Aisling asked. "I think if I do this right, It'll give us another way to defeat Malum, Marisol said. But this will only work if we have the reality perforator. Marisol and Aisling looked at each other. They both swayed on their feet as the plane started its final descent into Stockholm. If I see it, I'll try to grab it, Aisling said. Do we have to bring it to the broken gate? No, Marisol replied, but if we can get it there, that'll make this crazy idea of mine easier to pull off. The Learjet set down at Bromma Airport on the outskirts of Stockholm. As soon as the deployable stairway was in place, Blake and Callie faced the creations. Malum's got the jump on us, and he's already inside Paradox HQ, Callie said. All bets are off now, Blake added. We can't afford to play by the rules anymore. We need to get to Paradox HQ as fast as possible and start picking off Malum's team, Callie said. Remember the plan. Take them 2 at a time. Avoid grabbing more than one gifted person at a time. Callie rounded on her SWAT team. You guys, we're in the shit now. I don't care how many civilian vehicles you have to commandeer. Just get us to PDX. Understood? Yes, ma'am, a trooper responded. We'll isolate Malum, Blake said. Get him on his own. That's the key. Marisol wanted to disagree, but she held her tongue. Trig, Sebakira, and Conti erupted out of the plane, a wave of psionic energy preceding them. By the time Callie and her team were on the tarmac, the gifted creations had already used telepathy to force an airport employee to give up the van he was driving. Everyone pile in, Conti ordered. I'm going to fly ahead and get us a second vehicle. In a matter of minutes, Team Marisol was rolling away from Bromma Airport, riding in 2 airline-owned passenger vans. In the lead vehicle, Callie turned around to face Aisling. Malum is probably going to see us coming. Is there any way you can mask our approach? Callie said. Aisling looked over at Marisol, who was muttering into her phone. Marisol looked up. It's okay. I trust you'll find me no matter what's about to happen. Marisol squeezed Aisling's hand. The fairy locked eyes on Callie. How do I know the way to the battlefield? She asked. Bella replied from the driver's seat. Just follow the blue lights and sirens. The Great Khan stood on the roof of the Paradox Sky Bridge, looking down at the street below and around the 2 buildings the structure was connecting. To his left, Paradox headquarters. To his right, the local office of the International Rescue Committee. Down below, Stockholm City Police. There were nearly 24 law enforcement vehicles clogging the street. Officers, equipped with bullhorns, were trying to speak to Malum, but they were beneath his notice. He raised one hand to the side of his head, listening to a telepathic message from Cassandra. Restoring electricity to the building is impossible. The power was remotely cut off at a distant source. Malum was forced to give credit where it was due. Paradox Interactive had made scant preparations for his arrival, but they were preparations nonetheless. He would have no choice but to fight Blake Robinson and his creations before seizing full control of the game company. He was pulled out of his own scheming by 2 voices down below. 2 of the Swedish police officers were talking to one another. They spoke Swedish, but Malum could penetrate deep into their minds to understand the words. Sir, I have a message from command, one of the cops said. It will take an hour to scramble the National Task Force. National Task Force? Replied the commissioner. Does the Royal Army know what's happening here? You'd think superpowered aliens would get more attention. Malum raised one hand, causing a pulse of telepathic energy to ripple across the block. Malum's willpower seeped into the minds of the police officers below. Your sense of duty is commendable, Malum spoke to the assembled officers. Now you must do your duty to the ruler you love with such devotion. In an instant, Malum purged the officers' minds of any thought related to Swedish King Carl Gustaf, and simultaneously filled the men and women of the police force with newfound love and devotion to the Great Khan. The commissioner blinked his eyes and started to issue new orders, calling on his subordinates to set up a defensive perimeter around Paradox headquarters. A moment later, Vetu Kealoa appeared on the roof. "I'm going back to guard the broken gate, as you ordered," Vetu said. "Is there anything I should take with me?" Malum noticed that Vetu was wearing a heavy coat over top of her normal outfit. The hem of her grass skirt was just barely visible beneath it. "It suddenly started getting cold," Vetu said. "Really, really cold." Vapor clouds formed in front of Vetu's face as she spoke. Ice crystals were starting to form on the sky bridge. A solitary snowflake fluttered through the air. Ushka the Water Witch reformed herself on the roof of Paradox headquarters. "They're here," she announced, shaking icicles from her dowsing rod. "They've brought the cold." Malum looked up, searching the skies above. After a moment, he spotted 2 white birds circling high over PDX headquarters. A peahen and a loon. "Well, here we are," Malum said, co-opting a phrase often used by his creator to signal penultimate peril. "Are you ready to pledge fealty to your new master?" Conti replied, her squawks echoing off the side of the building. "We have different plans, though if you ask politely, we'll let you have a marked grave." Malum turned to Ushka. "The sarcophagus?" he asked in a very impatient tone. "Installed and under guard," Ushka replied. A twisted smile came over Malum's face. "Good, then it is time," Malum replied. "Now we can engage them without restraint." Malum addressed Conti once more. "For too long we have been the unwilling participants in chaos, made for the entertainment of distant spectators. Tonight, we shall end this forever." Malum pointed one finger at Conti. A bolt of lightning shot out of a nearby cloud and struck her. Conti screamed and started falling to the ground. The loon issued a mournful cry, folded her wings, and dove after the stricken peahen. After a moment, there was an eruption of gunfire. Varian Robinson, Sebakira, Trick Shepminter, Callie DeCara, and all 6 members of the PDX SWAT team thundered around a street corner and made a beeline for the Paradox building. Trig held one hand aloft, projecting a psionic field as he went. Swedish police were overwhelmed by Trig's power and fled, throwing down their weapons as they went. Malum grabbed Vetu and said, "Defend the broken gate!" Then he jumped off the sky bridge. Malum landed on his feet, slamming into the street with such force he made a small crater. Sebakira reared to her full height, claws out, teeth gnashing. "Go! I'll take him!" Sebakira roared. Malum tried to blast the others with telekinesis, but Sebakira moved quickly to block it. "I am your foe! Fight me!" Sebakira snarled, her mouth filling with blue soul fire. Malum raised his right arm and activated the Ven brace. As the Prometheus came online, Trig, Varian, and Callie pushed their way into the Paradox building. Trig threw out an arm to stop Callie from walking into the line of fire. "Gunman ahead! Look out!" Wood and plaster fell onto Callie's head as someone fired a Gauss rifle inside the main lobby. Trig tossed Callie to the floor and then projected his own psionic power through the wall. "Stay back!" Trig yelled. "DeCara, it's your husband and his sister. I've got them." "How? It sounds like Dak and Mocha have got magnetic weapons over there," Callie said. "They do," Trig said, "but I know a psionic technique that should get them both." Trig pressed his hands together and then pulled them apart. A dark wisp of black smoke hovered between his palms. Trig knew he was trying to save Dak and Mocha from being killed, but just for this moment, he needed to put those feelings aside. Trig looked deep inside his own soul for 2 highly specific emotions. Without them, this technique would not work. Trig built up his focus and willpower, and then he found both of the requisite emotions, apathy and despair. Trig funneled those emotions into a telepathic wave and then pushed it through the wall toward his targets. Dak was hit by the wave, and then the psionic pulse jumped out of his body, striking Mocha. They both dropped their weapons and slumped to the floor, dazed. A low whistle caught Trig's attention. Was that a Mind Scorch? Isn't that an evil power used by the villains? Blake and Marisol had arrived, and it was Marisol who had spoken. Yeah, Mind Scorch is totally a villain power, Blake replied. Hey Trig, did Ponico teach you that in your story? Nah, I figured it out, Trig replied. What about Sebakira? She's holding her own, but not for long, Marisol said. Aisling and Conti are on their way to help, but Malum is strong. We have to move, quick.